is my ID. And here are the note cards. Okay. In 2017, the average high school dropout rate was 5.4%. Most schools in America are funded mostly by local property taxes, which means depending on how expensive the properties are in that area, that means whether the tax is going to be higher or lower and how much the school will receive based off of those taxes. Layla Janae is quoted as saying, talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not. And I think all of us can agree that the most important part of our education system is obviously our public schools, and we should be treating it that way. The students in these schools are the future of America. Today I'll be discussing a few of the problems that America's public schools are facing, a possible solution to those issues, as well as some of the benefits that would come from that solution. Let's see. So there's a major disparity in the condition of public schools across America. The wealthiest districts have much nicer schools, much better funding than the poor districts. So according to a report by the Education Trust, school districts with the highest rates of poverty receive approximately $1,000 more per student than the schools with the lowest poverty rates. That actually jumps up to, in the same study, schools with the highest population of Latino, Native American, and Black students actually received, on average, 13% less than those with the lowest rates of students of color. Also, many public school teachers are quitting their jobs because of poor working conditions and low salaries. And actually, according to Forbes, 15.3% of teachers in 2017 left their job within a year due to poor conditions, and that actually rose up from 14.9% the previous year. In that same article, it's noted that about 1.1% of all teacher jobs in America are either vacant or they're only filled temporarily. And as a solution, I propose that we need to start voting to require states to change the way that they fund their public schools. And spending more money on public schools is going to benefit students, and it's going to lead to better outcomes for those students after they graduate. So according to AmericanProgress.org, increases in public education spending will result in student achievement levels rising, even more so, especially among low-income students. And the same article explains that the nation's GDP, our gross domestic product, is actually closely tied to the education levels that our students are receiving and the success that they have. So if those go up, our GDP will also rise. Also, an increase in teacher salary will only serve to benefit students, and that will come from an increase in the budget for education. According to an article found on AmericanPress.org, 18% of U.S. teachers work a second job or more outside of the school system. And teachers receiving better pay would mean that they don't have to work the second job on the weekends or in the evenings, and they can spend more time putting that effort into their students and their jobs with the school. So an increase in the state education spending would mean better resources for students, a lower dropout rate, which is great, and a less of a disparity between the richer school districts and the poor school districts and their conditions and the opportunities those students have. So increased education spending has actually been proven that it will help result in better test scores. And in a New York Times article, they found that in a study done over the past 40 years, states that changed the way their schools are funded found an increase in their test scores, especially in poor districts. And in that same article, it's explained that states that send additional money to their lowest income school districts see improvement in those districts, in their test scores. Increased state spending will increase graduation rates, which is fantastic. So actually in another New York Times article, there's been a study performed, and it shows that for low-income students who spent kindergarten through 12th grade in the same school district, so they didn't move school districts at all through their entire primary education, and those districts, while they were there, increased the funding, or the states changed the way that those districts were funded. They found an increase in graduation rate by 23% in those students. And it actually found out later on in the study, it continued, and it found that the family income of those students in those districts actually increased 52% higher than it would have been if the districts in the states didn't end up spending more money on education. Um, in summary, we need to vote for states to change the way that they raise money or that schools are funded. And this is going to result in a smaller disparity in the conditions of public schools, higher test scores, better graduation rates, better pay for teachers, and overall this will even be better for the economy, as I explained, with the GDP linked to academic success of our students. And our schools are perhaps the most important part of our country, and I think it's up to us to start treating them as such.